All right, here we are. Welcome, everybody. This is the Fantasy Basketball Advice Network. I am SoCal Ball Nerd. He is Coach Craig. This is the first episode of the Fantasy Football Advice Network show. Maybe have a cool title here down the road. Only 20 games into the NBA season. Football's starting to kind of come to that end, so we want to really get diving into some basketball as we do daily anyway. Coach puts out his DFS content. We've got bets, things across X all week long for you. But this is officially our first episode. We're going to go over the play-in tournament tonight. We're going to do some waivers for you, matchups we like, see what else we mix in. That'll kind of be the gist of things as we move forward, excluding, the tournament after this week, as that's its own special thing. So, like I said, I am SoCal Ballnerd, and with me is Coach Craig. How you doing tonight, Coach?
I'm doing all right. I apologize. This lighting is not the greatest, but it's a new place that I'm in. Not everything's set up here right now at this point in time. The one room doesn't have any lights, so just got this lamp up next to me. But, it's kind of late at night here, so hopefully, people go out and they enjoy this episode, first of all. If there's anything in particular you guys want to see, let us know, too.
Definitely. Drop it in the comments. Fantasy topics, league-specific questions. We know Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, weekly, daily. There's a lot of different dynamics, but we got it all. We're ready for it. So we want to bring you all what will help you, win some fantasy basketball championships, win some bets on the day. So we're going to start things off tonight with that play-in tournament. Going to bring up the bracket here for you, kind of go over the matchups a little bit, some things we like there. Let's do that. Here we go.
Yep.
Bam, perfect. So we'll just go, I guess, left to right? We got the Western Conference. We got the Lakers and the Suns. Below them, we've got the Kings and the Pelicans. And we'll just start there in the Western Conference. Of course, the two winners of those games will play each other in a semifinal matchup. And the winner of those two will go on to play in the championship against whoever comes from the Eastern Conference. So looking at the Lakers and Suns or Kings Pelicans, who do you like in those games? And is there anybody that you like specifically in those matchups?
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty interesting. I do have a couple notes here. So the Lakers and Suns have played twice this year. The Lakers have won both those meetings. One of them was in group play. One of them was just, a regular game. So I think it's been kind of interesting too with the in-season tournament. We could probably talk a little bit more about that probably once it's over, because then we can kind of see the whole big picture. So maybe that's something we do next week. I think the Lakers probably have the advantage there once again. We'll see whether or not Devin Booker plays. That's obviously a big thing. He's missed the last couple games for them, or might just be the last one at this point in time. They left the game before that injured. My memory serves me correctly. So I think the Lakers do have a decent advantage there, especially if they can get after Kevin Durant and stop him. That's going to be one of the big things. We'll see how many minutes Vanderbilt can play, because he just came back on Saturday. So he could be another guy that goes out there and plays pretty good defense against Durant, but how much can he actually go out there and play? It'll be very interesting to see what these teams do rotation-wise. Are they going to treat it like a playoff game where they're playing their starters big minutes and cutting their rotation down to like 8, 9, or 9 guys max? Some teams down to 8. That's going to be like kind of one of the big things. I do like the Lakers though overall in the game. I think, at least as the teams are currently constructed, they're the better team between them and the Suns. Obviously, there's no Bradley Beal for who knows when. Like I already said, Booker's got that ankle injury. We'll see whether or not he ends up playing. And then for that other game, too, the Kings and the Pelicans and the Kings have played twice this year. The Pelicans have won both times. The first meeting was a pretty lopsided victory, but it was the second half of a back-to-back for the Kings. And if you look at what the Kings have done so far this year, they've been destroyed on every second half of the back-to-back. So if you're out there in the betting streets, just bet the money line for the team against them on the second half of the back-to-back the rest of the season, because it's probably going to end up pretty good for you overall. I think the Pelicans have the slight advantage here. Obviously, they're getting a little bit healthier. They did get C.J. McCollum back, and he's actually played pretty big-sized minutes. Be interesting to see, too, because, with the travel for this game, he was not even cleared like to fly for a while. So I don't know if he's able to go fly that way or if they had to like drive him out or take a bus out there or what, that's kind of something interesting too. They did get Trey Murphy back from his knee recovery. I think he had a little bit of surgery to start off the year, and he played 22 minutes in his return. So that's a big factor for them. He's a long leggy guy that can play some defense and obviously switching gives them a lot of versatility, especially with no Larry Nance out there at this point in time. So I do like the Pelicans. Both these teams are kind of similar where they could go out and they could just obliterate, just destroy the other team pretty much and play really well. Or, they could have both come out and lay an egg. So it's kind of unpredictable with those two.
Are there any guys in those games that you would look to maybe stream this week that were out there on waivers or that you would look to play in these matchups? Obviously, depending on who wins and loses, that second game, you don't know who they match up with, but you do know that they would get, a second game this week in that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing on the daily, there's not a lot of games out there this week to start the week. So that's obviously going to be a big thing. So if you want to play some of those role players that might be on waivers from your Lakers and Suns game, that makes some sense. Kings, most of the guys are probably rostered at this point in time. Maybe Trey Lyles, who came back recently, but he's a little bit banged up again. And then like the Pelicans side, there's probably not too much out there. It's mainly like Trey Murphy that would be available for the most part. Like for the Lakers, if you want to go out and grab Vanderbilt and you want to stream him, that's another thing. He'll probably get back in that starting lineup at some point. Be really interested to see how that all pans out as the season moves along, since he was a big part, to their second half surge and in the playoffs. But obviously a little bit different unit this week, this year, just in general. But I think he's somebody worth rostering, stashing at the very least because of the block upside, at the very least, because that dude loves blocks more than anybody I've ever met. Gets him into foul trouble a lot of times, but he's out there trying to block every shot he can. So, the Suns guys, you can always stream some of those too, especially without Booker out. And it's always like Eric Gordon, Grayson Allen, they always end up on waivers. So, if you need a guy at least early on, if you're playing in the daily league, they're probably out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and even if you're, if you have a weekly lineup too, I mean, you get 2 games out of those guys. I think, Grayson Allen, Eric Gordon, definitely on the Suns. Kind of the wait and see, but I think if you have a spot for him, hey, throw him on there, because long-term too, I think Vanderbilt is going to be, he's going to be in that lineup. He's going to play for the Lakers. He's going to give you, some solid numbers. I really like Trey Murphy. I'm interested to see how it works, right? You get McCollum back. I mean, Najee Marshall's, coming along. You've got Trey Murphy. They just have a lot of pieces with Zion and Ingram to see how they gel, and now they've got this tournament time. It's like, are they going to do some damage in this tournament? What I like about the Pelicans is that they do play a lot more defense than the Kings. And I think that's what gives them kind of the advantage in this matchup to me, is that both these teams can score, but the Pelicans, I think, will show up and play defense. So I like the Pelicans too. And if Trey Murphy's out there, like, I'm grabbing him for long-term. He was, to me, coming on strong last season. I mean, he ended up, last 5 games of the season was averaging 20-plus points a game. I know Zion was out, but he progressed, from 12 to 13 to 18 to 12 last few. He does a lot of good things, and I think, life can even be easier with Zion and Ingram at times, right? Because it opens up the floor for him, I loved what he was doing. That injury was tough. It was devastating, I thought, for a player on the rise, but I think he's somebody worth stashing. The Kings, Harrison Barnes, maybe for 2 games, could be a guy you might look at. He's probably, I don't know if he's rostered or not, but he could be somebody this week that's just worth taking a flyer on. But like I said, I like the Pelicans there, and I like the Lakers too. I think that, I think this tournament matters enough. I think LeBron likes to win things that matter. I think he likes to make that statement. I think him and AD show up, getting Rui back, from his little injury, getting Vanderbilt in. That lengthens their team a lot more than what they had, these last 2 weeks, that Rui was out and Vanderbilt's been out all year. I mean, they just lost. They need that depth, right? They need that rotation. So I like the Lakers and the Pelicans both here as well. I guess we can continue on that matchup before we go. So we'd have Lakers Pelicans in the next matchup there. Yeah. Who do you like in that matchup?
I think that was the way I'm leaning too. Obviously, you got the whole Anthony Davis story. If you really want to go that direction too, you got Brandon Ingram there too. And I was just going to say too, with Trey Murphy, like you're talking about, Brandon Ingram and Zion being healthy. But the thing is, his value skyrockets when one of those two gets hurt, because that's probably going to happen at some point in time. They're going to get days off on back-to-back, so he's going to look even better in those type of situations. And the fact that they just let him rip 22 minutes after not playing all year is a good sign, just in general. I think the Lakers have the easiest path to the finals. But now that I say that, they'll probably lose the first round to the Suns.
So we're pretty much in agreement on that side. I mean, yeah, I think Lakers Pelicans, and I think Lakers get there. I just think it's, and it's not a 7-game series. It's just one game. So, 2 games to get there. And I think that the better teams will turn it on. They will have something to play for, have that chip on their shoulder. LeBron and AD don't want to get sent home. Now, I know we say that, so it could happen, but I think Lakers are there. So a few players that we targeted there, right? We mentioned Grayson Allen, Eric Gordon, maybe a Harrison Barnes, talked about Trey Murphy. You could look into Jared Vanderbilt. Maybe even Rui Hachimura, is somebody that, in this time where Vanderbilt's not fully back, they were looking to him. He's a scorer too. I mean, anytime obviously that, somebody's out, he seems to rise to the occasion. When everybody's playing, sometimes he kind of falls back into that rotation. But I think, it's worth looking at as well. Moving over to the East. Yeah.
Do you take anything away from the fact that him and Vanderbilt were both available the last game and Vanderbilt played and he didn't?
Yeah, other than Rui was coming off the injury, and Vanderbilt too, yeah. But he's been – I think they waited a long time to bring Vanderbilt back. So I'm not sure. Is it that they're going to play that way? Is it Vanderbilt was more ready? They didn't need to go to Rui. They also – pretty much dominated that game. They kind of from start to finish, a little early, the Rockets had a lead in the second quarter, but after that, the Lakers really took control and it never really got away from them. So that might change things too with the matchups. But obviously, with both them playing and everybody healthy, I think he won't play as much, but maybe this week with both those games, depending on what they're doing with Vanderbilt, maybe they eat in. So it's kind of tough because I'm not sure which way you'd go there. You don't really want to be up in the air. We mentioned other players that are probably going to at least get their guaranteed minutes. Like, give me Grayson Allen, in 2 games. Give me even Harrison Barnes. Like, just give me the guys that are going to play, because I don't want to have Rui out there and then find, he doesn't even play a single minute. That's not what you want to do. So we'll take that little bit of volume, wherever we can get it. Because we're talking, these aren't your core guys. These are the end of the, roster guys that you want to make an impact, that make a difference, but you're playing your big guns. So Eastern Conference side, we got the Bucks and the Knicks, and we got the surprising Indiana Pacers that can score about 140 a night, but couldn't stop you and me on a 2-man game, it looks like. And they get the Celtics, who are phenomenal on both sides of the ball. I know they've got a few bad losses this season, but it's regular season basketball. The Charlotte Hornets are not beating the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. Beat them once somehow. But with that being said, let's just go to, Celtics Pacers is the 2-3 matchup there. What do you see here? Does Indiana have a chance to win this game?
So in fairness, I think that game they lost to the Hornets was that game where PJ Washington started off the game and couldn't miss at all. And, you only get that game like once every 20 games. So that is something to be said there. So the Celtics and the Pacers have only played once so far this season. Celtics absolutely destroyed the Pacers. They won by 41 points. But it was a game that Tyrese Haliburton did not play. So that is very important to mention. I feel like somebody else missed that game, but I can't remember who off the top of my head. I know Haliburton for sure did not play that game because I remember it that day. I remember betting on the Celtics too. I'm like, oh, this is just free money at this point in time. So it's going to be a pretty interesting matchup there. There should be no Kristaps Porzingis probably once again for the Celtics. So that is a factor at the very least. But, Al Horford, I don't even remember how old Al Horford is now. I feel like he's 38. But that dude's been playing really well as of late. One goal in life I have is to get as jacked as Al Horford by the time I'm his age, just because I want to be in good as shape as he is. Like, it's just crazy how good a shape he's still in at his age of 38, obviously. You got LeBron up there too, but, nobody talks about Al Horford at the same time. Celtics, they have all the talent in the world. They should win this matchup. I feel like the Pacers overperform a lot of the time. Like, you look at all the pieces they have, and it's just like, how are they winning this many games? Because like this core group of guys isn't that great. Halliburton's really good, playing at, like second team All NBA level at this point in time. Miles Turner's had his really good streaks like he always does. But then, like the rest of the guys, you got Buddy Hield. Sometimes he goes out there, he shoots well. Sometimes he can't hit the broadside of a barn. Then Bruce Brown's just old reliable. He does all the dirty work that you kind of hope for. Mathurin, sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not. Obi Toppin, some games he shows up, some games he doesn't. Aaron Nesmith, sometimes that's like the one guy on their team that plays defense outside of Miles Turner. But it's just, they got all this collaboration of guys, and it's just kind of, it's a big puzzle every night. So they're like one of those teams like you never really truly want to play for DFS. Like, you're interested because they score a lot of points to give up a lot of points. But figuring out the minutes for their guys is a pain in the butt every single night. So it'll be really interesting in this tournament too, who gets hot for them, who stays in the game. But I think ultimately the Celtics just going to win this game either way, though.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you as far as the team pick. I mean, to me, it just comes down to, as we mentioned, the stars rising up, playing both sides of the ball. The Celtics play phenomenal defense when they want to. I see them, clamping down and being able to not stop the Pacers, because this is the NBA and this is a high-flying offense, but to do enough and to be able to score the ball too, because the Celtics also can put up points. And to me, they're just as good, if not better, on both sides of the ball. I know Indiana leads the league in scoring. I don't know if I'd say they're a better offensive team, though, than the Celtics, right? So you give me a defensive edge and an offensive edge, it's going to be hard for me to pick the other team. And I think the Celtics, they want to prove a point as well. They want to get to that matchup, at the end to see the Lakers, and they want to bring this home, I think, as much as everybody else. I think that's been determined, that these teams, especially the big-name teams, want to win. And these other guys, Pelicans, Pacers, they want to make a name for themselves. But I just think, the cream rises to the top here. I do like a couple guys. I mean, I think the Celtics advance. I would say if I had a guy from each team, as we mentioned, guys in the West. For the Celtics, I'm looking at a guy in Sam Hauser. We're talking about end-of-the-bench kind of guys. He's been knocking down the threes. This past week, I think he had about 11 a game with 3 threes. So if you're looking at a guy for, 2 games during the week that could get production, knock down a couple threes, I do think Hauser's a nice look.
Uh-oh. So, looks like Evan froze. Let's see if he gets back in, though.
I don't know there. Where did you lose me at?
You're talking about Sam Hauser. Lost you about 2 minutes ago at 17:20.
Sorry about that. So somehow we lost connection. Now let me pull the bracket back up, but I'll keep talking. I was saying Sam Hauser, think he scored about 11 points a game the last week. He's knocking down about 3 threes a game in that time. So talking about a guy at the end of your roster that can maybe give you a couple games this week, I think he would be the guy on the Celtics outside of your mainstays, of course, to maybe give you a little production. The other guy I was mentioning is for the Pacers is who you said in Obi Toppin. He's been scoring the basketball. I know he's got an illness going into Monday night, but he does seem like he's going to be playing.
He rolled his ankle.
Yeah, they have him as an illness, but it sounds like he's a go, and he's been playing with the starters in 5 straight games. I mean, averaging 17 in those games, close to 3 threes a games in each of those contests. I mean, if you can give me 17 and 2 or 3 threes in 2 matchups, for a guy who's 50% of leagues, I just think that is, that's really good. That's really good production from that spot. So that's why I like him, but I do lean Celtics there as well. But those are kind of the 2 players. I don't know if you have anybody else in that matchup that you look at.
I will say this with Toppin, though. The one thing with him is going to be defense, because if he's playing a 4 spot, he's going to go against Tatum. So I think there's a chance that Nesmith ultimately ends up being there more at the 4 than him, just for defensive purposes. And if you're one of those people that likes the whole revenge game thing, Aaron Nesmith used to be on the Celtics. I like the Hauser call. I have a soft spot for him just because I know his father. He's the athletic director of one of the schools that worked at for coaching. So I know a little bit about him. I haven't met him personally, but I know his dad. So comes from a good family. So when you look at the Celtics bench, there's not a lot there. It's going to be him. It's going to be Peyton Pritchard, and then kind of whoever they want to throw out as an extra big man, pretty much based on the day, whether it's Luke Cornett or Quetta. So there's not too much to be had there in terms of like streaming for the Celtics. If you want to get a stab on Pritchard or Hauser, those would be the 2 guys, because nobody else really pays off that bench at this point in time. And then from the Pacers side, if you want to take that shot on Nesmith, I don't have a problem with that. I think he's going to be out there a little bit more than Toppin just for the defense versus Tatum. If you think it's going to be Toppin, go ahead and do that too. Obviously, like we said, not a lot of games, at least early on. If you're playing daily, you can take a stab on either one, though, for sure.
Toppin maybe that little more like boom potential, right? If he is out there, you probably get the points. But if, they need the defense and doesn't play, you might get kind of robbed, kind of like the A-chain play, if you will, right? I mean, well, you want that upside. Not that he's an A-chain type player, but you know what I mean. That boom potential, the Deshaun Jackson type play.
Toppin's more likely to get in foul trouble too out of the 2 against Tatum.
And that's the thing too. Even if they want him out there and he's scoring, if he can't stop Tatum and gets in that foul trouble, right? So hopefully he scores some points and knocks down some threes in the limited time he's in there, and you'll be happy with a flyer, like I said, on the end of the roster. So Celtics advance in there, and they're going to be playing the winner of the Bucks and the Knicks, who, both these teams are pretty good. The Bucks don't seem to play a lot of defense. The Knicks have been a little better defensively. They rebound the ball well. I think they can score. With that being said, I like the Knicks here, but give me your thoughts on this matchup.
Okay, so the Bucks and the Knicks have played one time so far this year. I can't remember if it was in group play or not. I want to say it was outside of group play. The Bucks did end up winning that game ultimately 110-105. So by modern NBA scoring, that is a low-scoring game. We'll put it that way. I like the Knicks to win this game. I just don't trust the Bucks, because every time I think I can trust them, even when I bet on them, and you think you can trust them because there's no way they're going to lose to the Bulls, and then they lose to the Bulls without DeRozan and Levine. But that's a whole other story for a different day. The Bucks are like one of these most inconsistent teams in the NBA right now. Sometimes they look really good. They're scoring a lot of points. They're kind of like the Pacers. They score a lot of points, but they don't play any defense at all because there's no Drew Holiday anymore, and because Chris Middleton can only play 22 minutes a game. They ramped him up to 29 for one game. Then the next game he tweaked his Achilles or something like that. So who knows how much he's going to play in the tournament. I always say the Bucks are as good as Chris Middleton is, because you kind of know what you're going to get out of Giannis. Now you got Dame. Dame's been – it's really slow start to the year, but that's kind of something that he does a lot of times anyways. And then he'll have that month where he just can't miss a shot at all. But you need Middleton. Like he's just kind of that guy that steadies the ship. There's always a guy on every team that kind of stays the ship. And even if you look back when they played in the finals, when he had a good game, they won the game. When he didn't have a good game, they usually lost the game because you already kind of knew what you're going to get out of Giannis. And then he was just kind of the second guy and really really going from there. For what it's worth, Brook Lopez has played pretty well lately. As much as I hate Brook Lopez. I don't think it's the greatest matchup for Brook Lopez, but who knows?
I mean, I guess you might, you could pull Mitchell Robinson, I guess, away from the basket a little bit there, but I don't think it matters there. I mean, on the Knicks side, I think there's a few guys maybe that you could look at playing. You got Josh Hart, you've got Isaiah Hartenstein, you've got Quickly, you've got Quentin Grimes. Are there any of those kind of guys on that squad that you like this week? If you're getting the Knicks to win and getting 2 games, and this is, weekly where you get both those matchups, do any of those 4 guys stand out to you at all?
So the thing with the Knicks is like how deep did they play their bench in this game too? Because I'm not sure Hartenstein's going to get that many minutes unless, Robinson gets in foul trouble. But like even when you're talking about getting Robinson away from the basket, sometimes you might get Robinson more on Giannis and Randall more on Lopez because it just makes more sense, like in theory. Not saying that's the way it's always going to play out, but it does make a lot of sense. And then so probably be like Josh Hart, Manuel Quickly if he's out there because he can just go out and shoot like crazy on any given night. And then DiVincenzo's been playing a couple extra minutes as of late too. So it's just kind of like which of those guys do they play the most? And probably another guy too, just kind of worth mentioning is how, with this tournament mattering more, do the uptick in RJ Barrett's minutes once again or not?
Which is a whole nother mess. We could do a whole show on RJ Barrett. I mean, the shooting woes aren't helping him as of late, but I think he is a volume guy that needs to have some consistency. But so we like the Knicks there. So we're talking Knicks Celtics in the second round there. We already have the Lakers in the finals. So can the Knicks do enough to beat the Celtics? They've, I think, lost to them twice this year already, if I'm not mistaken, but I believe they beat them 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3 last season. So,
yeah, it's one of those things too. Like, Iggy threw in the one group chat that the Knicks were like plus 1,600. I'm like, that's kind of filled out my bracket. I'm like, I kind of like the Knicks anyways. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go bet that anyways. I think the Knicks are kind of one of those teams that on most part they seem pretty steady. Brunson and Randall are playing really well right now. And they just kind of got that steady core. They kind of went. Last year, they went more to the non-defensive, not slow pace. They went and tried to play faster, and that didn't really work out. So now they kind of go back to defense and slower pace, and this worked out pretty well for the most part. So I just kind of like them in this tournament too. I think just kind of the steady hand, more or less. I think the Celtics, they go out and they have the good game, and then they have the bad game. So, they could go out and kill the Pacers, then they could be like, oh, now we're in the semifinals. We just play the Knicks, and we should win this game and lose,
I see that. I mean, and I love the Knicks, man. I was a big Knicks fan last year in regards to, what they were doing. And even, with betting as well, they were a successful team. It's hard for me to not see the Celtics win this when we talk about, wanting to win it. But, man, when you talk about the odds, and that was what I was going to ask you next, was outside of the Lakers and Celtics, because they're the 2 favorites. I think the Celtics are like plus 330 or plus 350, and the Lakers, I think, are maybe plus 500, plus 550. But it's the Knicks, right, who are plus 1,600. On the other side, it's kind of a pesky team. It's the Pelicans, that are plus 1,200. So when you look at it like that, I think the Knicks and the Pelicans are worth a flyer when you're talking about trying to, take home some money in this with the betting and maybe doing, a little bit of hedging there with the Lakers and the Celtics. I think those are the 4 teams to get the full value. So I think the Celtics are going to be there, and it'll be Lakers Celtics, but I will be rooting for the Knicks to win that game. So do you have the Lakers beating the Knicks then, or the Knicks beating the Lakers?
I think in the bracket I had the Knicks winning all, and then I bet them too. So now I kind of feel like I'm just kind of on the whole train just in general too. But, I think they're just one of the steadier teams that are kind of out there in this tournament. I think that is ultimately what's going to pay off, in this long competitive week that you're going to have too. They've pretty much been healthy most of the year too. So that is another good thing in their favor. Obviously, RJ Barrett he had a couple games where he missed with, I think, a knee, and then he had like that weird 3-game stretch where he was listed as illness/migraine for like 3 games in a row. But other than that, they've pretty much been healthy all season. So I think that's something that helps to, I like the upside of the Lakers, but then you're also getting some of these guys back and they really just haven't played together. So I think there could be a lack of chemistry there too. A lot of those guys were there last year too, but then you got guys like Prince that wasn't there. Cam Reddish wasn't there last year. It'd be really interesting to see what that Lakers team ultimately looks like once everybody's all there together too. One of these days, Gabe Vincent might actually return, although, the Lakers fans want to throw eggs at him for the beginning of the year performance. But it'll be very interesting to see what that team ultimately ends up in its final form and how they use those guys. And they got so many different guys and so many different types of players there that it might be something that, you take into each game. Okay, we're playing this person in this game. This guy's going to come off the bench this game. This other guy might not play. And then you kind of mix and match stuff there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see with the Lakers. What they do offensively. Do they do a lot more pick and roll with LeBron and AD like they did last year in the playoffs? They haven't done that a lot this year. The word is maybe that they're not doing that because they're trying to figure out how to gel as a team outside of that. Like they can go to that any given time. Is that the case? I don't know. It's been a popular theory, in Southern California. That also just sounds nice to why they're not doing it.
I was going to say too, or like the whole hip thing with Anthony Davis, is that still bothering him where they're just not trying to move him around as much too?
It's hard to tell because when he wants to take over, he's pretty dominant at times. So it's like, but it's defensively with this team, even with Prince, who wasn't there, Reddish has just been an animal on the defensive end in the steals column. You now get Vanderbilt back, get Rui in the rotation. The length that the Lakers have on the wings, I think, can just cause difficulty to these teams. And the Knicks, the Celtics, they like to shoot the three ball. I think those teams are going to have to be hot to beat the Lakers from three. So I think if the Lakers can do enough offensively and they can hold down a little bit from the three-point line and not get a barrage of 15-plus threes against them, I think I'd like the Lakers to take it home. I just think that's just kind of who LeBron is. It's hard to bet against LeBron, but if you like what Coach is saying, and I do, I have a wager on it as well. Knicks plus 1,600 is much nicer than the Lakers at plus 500. I think they are plus 550 now, but it was plus 500 before. Yeah. But like I said, if you like those plays, a little bit on the Pelicans, a little on the Knicks, Lakers, Celtics, you kind of cover your basis there to walk home with some winnings. So it looks like we got the Lakers or the Knicks winning this whole thing.
And too, another good thing you could bet on too is that in-season tournament MVP. So, if you're already thinking it's going to be, like, just for example, you think it's going to be the Knicks, then maybe you want to bet Jalen Brunson, maybe you want to bet Julius Randle. When I was looking the other day, I took it, I'm like, well, what if I parlay the Knicks winning plus Julius Randle, but bet you guys didn't like me doing that. They said I can't parlay those two things together for whatever reason. I don't know why, but so, maybe you want to, but you could do those two different things too at the same time. It'd just be kind of interesting to see. But, it's like, well, if you think a team like the Knicks is going to win, it's probably going to be one of those two guys being the MVP. It's like, if you think the Lakers are going to win, it's probably going to be LeBron or Anthony Davis winning an MVP. It's probably just going to be LeBron because it's LeBron. So if it's even close, they'll just give it to him,
Nice. I like that. Definitely worth looking into. So there we go. So we got, looks like either Lakers or Knicks coming from us. Like I said, I'm picking the Lakers here, but my pockets will be rooting for the Knicks because plus 1,600 is much better than plus 500. So I'll be happy either way. So we'll see what happens. Kicks off tomorrow night. Some good matchups. We should get some really good basketball. I do know that.
Yeah, I'll say too. So for people that aren't familiar with the schedule, the first round, the knockout round, is on Monday and Tuesday. So I believe, let me just go off the top of my head here. So it's the Pelicans and the Kings that play tomorrow, and then Pelicans, Kings, and Celtics and Pacers. So there's two teams that play on Monday, and the Lakers, Suns, and Bucks and Knicks play on Tuesday. And then the semifinal round will happen on Thursday, and the finals will ultimately be on Saturday. And then kind of all the other teams that didn't make the tournament, they're all kind of hanging out. None of them play on Monday or Tuesday. Most of them have games on like Wednesday and Friday this week, just because it's like the days that the tournament's not happening.
Exactly. So, well, we will see what happens. We come back on next week. We'll have plenty more to share there. So let's get into a little more across the entire league here. We got waiver pickups, of course, every single week, sometimes every day. You could kind of call DFS a waiver pickup as well, right? But however you want to look at it, there's always guys coming up out of the ashes. There's guys coming back from injury. There's guys being injured. So let's kind of transition into that waiver topic, and let's just do a couple guys each here, and then we'll talk about some matchups this week. So give me your favorite waiver pickup, and we'll go back and forth with like 2 or 3 guys here.
Yeah, so I got, let me just see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 8 guys that I didn't have written down just to start off. But, kind of one of the biggest ones, probably the most obvious name is going to be Bojan Bogdanovic for the Pistons. Depending on what site you play on, he's small forward, power forward eligibility. One of the sites, I think he was also like shooting guard eligible, but he's rostered in 26% of ESPN leagues, 64% of Yahoo leagues. He came back, played off the bench in their most recent game, played 27 minutes, scored 22 real-life points. So he is one of the better players that's on the Piston. Kate Cunningham's probably the best player. He's probably the second best player. Surprising that they haven't traded him yet at this point in time. He had that calf injury, I believe, is a grade 2 strain, so he's been out the whole season up until, what was that, Saturday when he came back. So he is a guy that's definitely worth rostering. He's a guy that should be rostered. Obviously, you see the big discrepancy between ESPN and Yahoo. Yahoo got ahead of the curve early, but unless you're in unless you're in that super shallow league, this guy needs to be on a team.
Definitely. I mean, I loved him last year. I mean, he is just like I said, a Swiss Army knife at a position. I mean, if you're playing like in a weekly league, where you set your lineup and you got 2 or 3 games, there's a spot for him every time. And he just quietly puts up, 20 plus points. He knocks down threes. He does a little bit of everything. So I like him as well. I know you have other guys on your list that I like. We mentioned Jared Vanderbilt that I know is on that list. I'm going to go with somebody that's not on your list just to switch it up a little bit here. Going to the Chicago Bulls, and it's Patrick Williams. I like Patrick Williams. Levine is out right now. I think for this week, he is a good play. He has been putting up more than 10-plus shots a game. He's giving you the minutes. He gives you the defensive stats. And long-term, listen, I don't know what's going to happen with Levine and with this team, but the Bulls look like they want to see what they do have in this guy. I know he's been around for a few years already, but they look to want to see. We're moving on from these other players. We have nobody else on this team, right? Lonzo Ball is probably never going to play another game in the NBA. Levine probably going to go. DeRozan going to go. I think the Bulls want to see what they have in him. So I think while Levine's out, he's a nice play, especially if you need the defensive stats on your team. And I think with that being said, as the Bulls move forward, he could be a nice long-term play throughout the season. So I like Patrick Williams on the Bulls. I don't know what he'll end up being, but I think at this time, he's a good week 7 streamer, and I think he could be somebody that helps you long-term.
Yeah, I just never, in my heart of hearts, I grew up a Bulls fan. I pretty much haven't given a crap for the Bulls since Derrick Rose left. Let's put it that way. Patrick Williams, they took him over Tyrese Halliburton. It's just so bad. And then Patrick Williams at the beginning of the year, he's like, I'm a max contract player. I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, he's not Tyrese Halliburton, and he's not a max contract player, but he is what I think it could be a solid week 7 streamer and an end of the roster guy. But I mean, 7 of 9, 6 of 10, 6 for 14, 6 for 11, double-digit points. He brings it on the defensive side, and I just think he's getting that chance to have the uptick and be a guy on a bad team. And there's nothing wrong with that in fantasy, right? A chance to be the guy on a bad team, get 11, 12-plus shots a night, bring some defensive stats to the table. It won't be pretty, but it could be nice production for you. So what else you got for me, Coach?
Hold on a second. I got to run to the bathroom quick.
Go for it.
So do you got anybody else you kind of want to rattle off real quick?
Yeah, I'll go rattle off somebody else while you go here.
Yeah,
I'm going to bring up I don't think Duncan Robinson's probably available for most people. Tyler Hero's going to be probably making his return, but Duncan Robinson's been playing 30 minutes a game. He is still out there in a bit of leagues. I think if you can grab him for this week and get his matchups for the next week, he's well worth the play. But if you're looking for something a little deeper, and this is a little more specific for 3-pointers, if that's an area in your league that you need help in, I'm looking at Isaiah Joe on the Thunder. He's been quietly knocking down just under 3 threes a game. There aren't a lot of guys that do that in the league, and there's a lot of teams that are missing that 3-point shooter consistently. I think he's a name that nobody really talks about. The thing about him is he doesn't really bring anything else to the table outside 3-pointers. So you really have to have a balance on your roster if you want to target Isaiah Joe. I'm going to get Duncan Robinson before I do that. But I just think Isaiah Joe is a nice name to target. If you've got a balanced team and 3-pointers are one thing you're missing, look at Isaiah Joe. He's available in like 82% of most leagues across the board. I think he's a quiet, underrated pickup. Another guy I really like is Keontae George. He's probably about 50% rostered in leagues. His field goal percentage has not been good, but everything else he has been doing great. If you don't have field goal percentage in your league, Keontae George might be one of the best pickups you can have. But if it's a category that you're able to kind of kick a little bit and you're doing well in, I like what George brings to the scoring table. I like what he brings in the assist column as well. If you scour your waivers, there aren't a lot of guys that are assist-worthy players. And Keontae George is one of those guys. I mean, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 3-pointers over the past 2 weeks. That's solid production, but he's shooting about 30% from the field. So, again, you got to watch that field goal percentage number. If you can't afford that or you can't move things around where that's really going to hurt you, that's the one thing you got to look at. But if you can, or that's not a category in your league, like I said, 13, 4, 5, and 2 threes over the past 2 weeks, I think he's somebody that you have to take a look at here. Andrew Wiggins went down. We know Jamal Murray has still been kind of battling back. So I think guys like Reggie Jackson on the Nuggets, even a Moses Moody on the Warriors, right? He came in, I believe, scored 21 points against the Clippers the other night. Going to get an uptick. Both those guys, I think, are short-term players. I mean, if you go get Reggie Jackson, he's probably going to give you 20 to 25 minutes. There's going to be nights where he doesn't shoot the ball well, but there's going to be nights where he does 20-plus for you. I know Reggie Jackson's a favorite of coaches for sure. I've mentioned a few guys here, Coach. A real quiet one for me that's probably not too popular, but specific was Isaiah Joe. Okay. If you have a roster where 3-pointers is something you need, he's the kind of guy I'm looking at right now. He's 2.8 a game. He just doesn't bring anything else to the table, so he has to fit what your roster needs. If that's not something you need, he's not going to be worth a spot. But I think he's somebody that's 80% of leagues is available, and if you see that you're missing 3-pointers in these first 6-7 weeks, he's worth a look. And my other guy that I really liked was Keontae George. The field goal percentage I mentioned kills him, but everything else, assists are hard to find on the waiver wire. So I don't want to repeat too much, but 13 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, and 2 threes per game over the last 2 weeks, shooting 30%. So hopefully that's not a category in your league, or you can get around it with the rest of your lineup. But I do like George and what he brings to the table as well. So
yeah. So
what else you got for me?
You had Isaiah Joe, Keontae George, Reggie Jackson. Anyone else?
I mentioned Moses Moody real quick, just with the Wiggins injury. So Moody and Jackson were probably more short term, especially Moody, because I think Wiggins will be back sooner than anybody else. Even with Murray working his way back in, I think Jackson's earned some playing time. So you're going to get a guy that still probably plays half the game. You're just going to have those nights where he hurts you, but you're going to have some boom nights too. So,
but you're also going to have the nights too where Jamal Murray's not going to play back-to-backs for like months. I guarantee that.
So I like Reggie Jackson longer than Moody for sure. But Moody, 21 points the other night. If you want a quick bang for a week or two.
He's interesting. Especially like Gary Payton's missed a lot of time this year, and Chris Paul's missed the last couple of games for him too. So there's minutes to go around for sure. Let's see. A couple other guys like I had. Scoot Henderson's one of those guys too. He's only owned in like half the leagues right now. He's a top 3 pick in the draft. He has not played well. Only played like a couple games this year. Got hurt, rolled his ankle, and got relegated to the bench essentially because Malcolm Brogdon's play so well. But now Brogdon's play so well, so he's going to get traded off the team pretty soon. Because like the only reason people weren't trading for him this summer is because they were worried about the like injury that he was going on, and he wasn't passing like physicals and stuff. So he's shown that he's healthy. He's shown that he can go out and do what he does. So he's not going to be on the team soon.
I like that. Talking about a guy on a bad team, right? Like we mentioned Patrick Williams, who's a lot more of a role kind of. He's not a max money guy. This is a top 3 draft pick who's going to be on a bad team and have a chance to be the guy. Mm-hmm. So you got to go and get those guys sooner than later, right? When Brogdon goes, you probably won't get him. So you kind of, it's more of a stash, like you had said before, but well worth it. I think he may be one of the biggest payoff stashes you can have if you're able to, put him on your roster.
Yeah, and he's a guy that could even contribute a little bit across the board too. Probably, if you're in a league where your shooting percentage or turnovers hurt you, he might not be as good in those leagues, but definitely a guy we're stashing at this point in time. We'll see his up to minutes at some point here. Be interesting to see when Anthony Simons ultimately comes back too, but because that will shake up things too. Because Sharp's played decent this year. He's had a lot of good games, but he's had a lot of terrible games too. So he was a guy that I wasn't big on coming out of the draft. So I was kind of shocked when they took him, but he's another guy that has a lot of potential.
You got anybody else on your list you want to mention, or you want to jump into some matchups this week?
We talked about Jared Vanderbilt a little bit, 18% roster on ESPN, 14 on Yahoo. He returned Saturday, played 14 minutes off the bench. Probably gets back into that starting lineup at some point, I think, or at least, a bigger role comes about. And then another guy that I really like that's kind of not rostered very much is Caleb Martin, shooting guard, small forward eligible on pretty much most sites for the Miami Heat. Good defensive player, first of all. He's only 3% rostered on ESPN, 14 on Yahoo. Played 35 minutes on Saturday. So could he possibly be returning to the starting lineup at some point in time in the near future? So Haywood Highsmith's kind of been that placeholder role, our favorite guy.
Our boy Haywood, baby.
He just got hurt too. So that's probably why Caleb played 35 minutes on Saturday. But sooner rather than later, he's going to be back in that starting lineup more than likely than not. Guy that contributes in a lot of different categories, so it should be pretty interesting there. Below him, Sadiq Bey, small forward, power forward eligible for Atlanta, rostering 20% of leagues only on ESPN and about half of Yahoo leagues. Jalen Johnson fractured his wrist. He's going to be out for a couple weeks at this point in time, obviously. So he's definitely a guy worth looking up. Derek Lively for the Mavericks, 13% rostered on ESPN, 46 on Yahoo, is another guy that is going to look really good. He's a rookie. He's playing all the center minutes pretty much for Dallas at this point in time, coming off like a 39-minute game. So going to look pretty good, just the upside that he has, probably rebounds, some blocks here and there. Probably not going to get too much else out of him, but, on ESPN, pretty much not owned at all or rostered at all.
Lively is going to become – those percentages are going to change very soon here, though. I mean, I think he might be the number one guy right now to go grab. I mean, 20 points, 16 boards, a steal, and 7 blocks the other night. To be that available for a guy that is just a lob rim protector guy, the upside that Lively has on that team is massive. So, I mean, you're going to see that percentage change here pretty quickly, I think, over the next few weeks.
And part of it, too, is just because he missed some games with that back injury, so that ownership is probably not as high as it should be. Xavier Tillman, power forward, center eligible for Memphis, 8% roster on ESPN, 20 on Yahoo, played 22 minutes on Friday in his return, 12 on Saturday. So not as much on Saturday, but he did play the back-to-back for a guy that's coming off a knee injury, so that is something good to see. There should be some center minutes available at some point, but, their front court's a little log-jammed at this point in time, but should have some upside as a decent young player at times. And then we got Trey Murphy, talked about him a little bit before, shooting guard, small forward eligibility on most sites. 14% roster on ESPN, 5 on Yahoo, returned on Friday, played 22 minutes and scored 18 points in that game.
Love it. Love it. Is that the end of your list?
Yeah, that's it for waivers.
So quite a bit of guys there to pick up. So, I mean, there's plenty of action out there. Again, depending on what your team needs, if it's, a weekly deal where you're looking for, a certain category, pay attention to what these guys do well and target those players. Because depending on what it is, there's some guys may be better than others, right? Depending on what you're looking for. So speaking of that, I mean, guys that are rostered already, let's get into some matchups this week. I think 2 teams that we're going to talk about a lot on this show, and 2 teams that we've talked a lot about with props as opponents that are fun, are going to be the Washington Wizards and the Atlanta Hawks. It was not surprising to see them on the sheet there. And there's a few teams that get both those teams this week that have some good players that can take advantage. So give me some guys and some matchups you like. If you want to go where the Wizards and Hawks are first, go for it. You want to go somewhere else?
Yeah, we'll talk about those ones quick. So the Nets play the Hawks and the Wizards. this week. The Hawks, obviously, versus the point guard position is not great. Trae Young, as good as he is on offense, he doesn't play defense to save his life. And when you talk about the Hawks team in general, Capella plays some defense, DeAndre Hunter plays some defense. DeJounte Murray used to play defense, at least in San Antonio. So they're just not as good defensively as they should be in general. It's kind of weird with being a Quinn Snyder team and everything, too. You think they'd be a little bit better in that regard, but Nets are definitely going to look pretty good there. Spencer Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas, who just came back to – he's another guy like I was looking at him for roster for waivers, but he's owned in 80% of ESPN leagues, 86% of Yahoo leagues. There's like a small chance you're in one of those leagues that he's not rostered in, so maybe you can get lucky and pick him up there, but not really worth too much mentioning at that. But he's a guy that can light up the scoreboard on any given night. And, Ben Simmons doesn't sound like he's coming back anytime soon with his back injury. He just had an epidural for it. So who knows? He was playing pretty good to start the year too. That's the sad part about it. Like everybody wants to give him crap for sitting out and all this stuff, but he was playing pretty well and his back acted up again. So, and then the other team that plays those two teams is going to be the 76ers. They play the Wizards and the Hawks as well. It's both good pace-up spots versus both teams. I like Maxey in the game versus the Hawks and Gafford very much in that game Embiid versus Gafford in that game versus the Wizards. So Embiid's going to be good any given night anyways, but going against Gafford is probably going to get even better. And, if you get Gafford in foul trouble, there ain't much behind him. It's Danilo Gallinari playing the 5 now.
Yeah, that's not good right there at all.
He came into the NBA as a 6'10" small forward. Now he is a 6'10" stretch 5.
Yeah, I like both those matchups too with the Wizards and the Hawks. So looking at the Nets, you mentioned most every other player. The guy that is scoring the rock for them obviously is Mikal Bridges. What do you have, 34 the other night in one quarter? But small forwards right now against the Hawks and the Wizards is a hot zone right now, and it doesn't matter what the lines are. You saw Franz Wagner the other night 2 times against the Wizards. They upped his line from what he averaged and what he put up both games, and he crushed that line. They did the same thing to Keldon Johnson of the Spurs when they played the Hawks. He crushed that line. Middleton barely hit his line, but he had 10 points in the first quarter, and then we know what's going on with him. But you can see the matchup there. He was 4 for 5 in the first quarter and exposed the hole that they have. And looking back in the games that Bridges has played, Washington and Atlanta this year, he took like 30 shots in those games. He just went to town. He had double-digit rebounds. He did everything across the board. So I know he's the star, but what I'm saying is this is a game where no matter what his line is or what you think, you are going to get star production both those games. And so I also think you mentioned Thomas, you mentioned Thomas, Cam Johnson as well. He plays a small forward position. There's a chance, if the Nets are winning this game, Johnson averages 15 points a game, about 3 rebounds. This is a spot where he also could have an uptick where he has a big night because he plays that small forward position, especially when Bridges isn't out there. And you go back and look at the numbers, like I mentioned, it's just killer what guys that play that position are doing to these two teams. And so for the Sixers, it's Tobias Harris for me too, in both those matchups. He's averaging 16 a game. We've seen what he can do before, right? He's kind of got a little quieter there because he kind of falls behind Embiid and now Maxey. But at any given time, Harris is still a solid performer. And like I said, the matchups for the small forward, you just can't deny it. So I think Tobias Harris has an uptick in production across the board in every category in those 2 matchups this week. So he's definitely one of my favorite plays this week. Those are probably my 2 favorite guys, looking at a star player and looking at kind of a third player, and a backup there that can kind of have a little more production.
Yeah, too, when you're talking about all those Nets guys, look at some of those 3-pointer made or props on those games too, because you're going to have Cam Thomas out there chucking it. Bridges, he's always kind of a good buy low. This guy, buy low guy this year, just because he's been really up and down this year. He hasn't been as steady as he was last year after he got Was it just last year he got traded from the Suns? Feels like
just
longer
last year. Yeah, just last year. Everybody's like, the Suns, it was the Suns' problem, not him. I mean, he's been a stud since he went over there.
Yeah, it's just it seems like longer ago than that for some reason. But look at his 3-pointer made prop. Look at Cam Johnson. The only thing with him too is he's been capping out at like 28 minutes lately, just because they have so many guys that can play that same spot. Royce O'Neal's played really well lately though. So
Royce O'Neal is a spot too. Especially if you're looking in the betting when they play the Wizards that game. Look at his assist prop because power forward area in assist against Washington has been a nice little hole. I found something real nice against Washington and Atlanta these last few weeks. So right now we're gonna strike while the iron's hot. And there's just certain positions where they get the ball in their hands, they're able to do something. I just can't believe some of these lines that have been increased that these guys still just continue to hit. So yeah. I stayed away from Wagner both times, and I'm like, man, I should have done it, because it wasn't even close. But that's okay. There's some other matchups, that were there that were worth hitting. So I think there's some good targets there for, betting and fantasy. I know we got the Bulls on here as well. We mentioned Patrick Williams. I do like Kobe White as well.
Yeah.
I like him this week because Levine's hurt. It's more so that than anything because he can get you some points. I think it's the Hornets that are a better matchup against the 3-ball for him. So I think he could have a big 3 night against Charlotte. And he's just going to be heavily involved. So I think if there's a week against 2 teams that aren't very good, this could be the week where you want to target and use him, among some formats that you're in, possibly certain lines, what they are for his 3 points made, like you mentioned. I think there's some good spots for him this week.
Yeah, just the Bulls in general, getting the Hornets and the Spurs, they're pace-up spots for both. I don't know how fast the Bulls actually want to play nowadays with how old most of their guys are getting to. But, Kobe White's a good one too, just because he's going to get as many shots as he pretty much wants. DeRozan will is too as well, Vucevic. But Kobe White's one of those guys, he's just super streaky. He's either going to go out and shoot 2 for 16 or he's going to score like even the other night, like on DraftKings, we were talking in one group chat. It's just like, we're going to play some Kobe White. I'm like, yeah, he's either going to have 50, he's either going to have like 50 DraftKings points or 15. There's like no in between because when you can just go out there and do whatever he wants, that's what's going to happen. He's going to make all the shots or none of the shots. There's just no in between. But it's a pretty good matchup versus both of them. Mavericks are another team to mention there too. They play the Jazz and the Trailblazers. Both should be pace-up spots for them. Mavericks are a team that traditionally likes to play pretty slow. Part of that is Luka, just being Luka, but it should be a pretty good spot versus both those teams. Should be 2 pretty easy games to win for them overall too, especially, if the Jazz still have a bunch of these guys out this week. Clarkson's missed like last 2 games. Markman's been dealing with a hamstring injury, so probably not the most competitive games there though. Timberwolves get the Grizzlies and the Spurs. Those look like pretty good matchups just in general. And then I just have one player listed at the bottom, because these point guards have been killing the Pistons in terms of real life points so far. So I did list Cole Anthony down there. I don't get why he doesn't start, honestly, but that's a whole different story for another day. It's just one of those guys. They're like, we're going to make this guy come off the bench and essentially be a starter, but we just don't want him to start. It's the whole like Lou Williams treatment.
Right. I mean, in talking about what you said, though, and Cole Anthony, man, he torched Washington the other night, and then the next game against Washington, he only took 3 shots and wasn't even on the court, which was like, I don't understand that. But he did back that up with an 8 for 16 performance against Brooklyn and dropped 20 points in 31 minutes. He has been scoring the basketball. D'Angelo Russell, 35 points against the Pistons. Brunson dropped, a 40 burger. And Brunson, we know, is a scorer, right? Russell was struggling. And Russell also, his worst statistics against which team it is? It's the Pistons. He's never had success. But this team this year is so bad against point guards. And Russell is a good player, but he was not shooting well. His point total was 13.5. He had 13 in the first quarter. Brunson had 16 in the first quarter. I think combined they were like 13 of 13 in their 2 games, and they're not the only guys. This Detroit team cannot stop the point of attack. There's absolutely no reason for Cole Anthony not to do work in this matchup. So I love that play too. I'm all over that when they played Detroit.
Yeah, and it could be a decent spot for Paulo in that game too. I don't hate Isaiah Stewart, but he's playing out of position still. He should be the rim protector at the 5, not out guarding 4s. We'll have to do some other video about how to fix the Pistons one of these days.
Oh, man. Well, they got to find somebody to stop the point of attack because their defense just breaks down. I don't think it matters who's protecting the rim because this NBA, it's too fast, too strong. You got no presence at the, point of attack. You're just out of luck all night long. I mean, that's why they've only won, 2 games all season. I mean, they were favored to beat Washington at home in a 2-14 matchup against a 2-14 matchup, and they lost. I mean, they couldn't even win that game. So, because they couldn't stop Washington.
Well, they only got 2 guys that can play defense, and it's Sir Thompson and Isaiah Stewart if he played the 5, but they just don't like doing that. So,
right. And I think, Paolo Banchero, man, I think anytime he wants to be a guy that gets you over, 31 and a half, points, rebounds, assists, he can do it. He just has the skill set if he wants to be that guy. Sometimes he defers a little bit. Sometimes the matchup, like you talk about, doesn't get him enough boards to do it. But he is becoming that player that, can consistently get that number, I think, against most matchups when he seems to want to go out there and do it.
Well, the hardest part with the Magic have like this big teetering problem where it's like Paolo can soak up a bunch of usage, Franz Wagner can soak up a bunch of usage, Cole Anthony can, Jalen Suggs when he's hot he can soak up a bunch of usage. So the ball there's only one ball on the court for 4 guys that can go 30+% usage on any given night.
And they're probably not all going to do well either if they are touching it. So it's kind of like you got to pick and figure out, which is where the matchups that we talk about really come into play, right? We mentioned kind of, the power forward spot against Washington getting assists, like targeting really those intricacies because, man, those numbers, especially on the props, right? 1 or 2, numbers makes all the difference, right? Dying on that hook. I mean, they know what they're doing when they set those lines. So other than that, man, I think that's good. We got, play-in tournament. We got some winners there. Again, if you like some dark horses, the Knicks plus 1,600, Pelicans plus 1,200. Lakers and Celtics seem to be the favorites there. We got a handful of waiver pickups. Great matchups this week. So, I mean, any questions, drop them in the comments. Let us know some players you like as well. We'll be back weekly with the show. Probably start doing a live show as well. Answer some questions for the Fantasy Basketball Advice Network. Other than that, you got anything else you want to say, Coach?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to anybody that is watching this video. Obviously, it's the first week, so we are going to be getting better as time goes on. We'll have a little bit more clear, streamlined structure and everything else like that too. Be sure to let us know who you think is going to win the in-season tournament down below. If you want to let us know who you think the in-season tournament MVP is going to be, throw that down there as well. If there's any other bets specifically you're making for in-season tournament, be sure to drop that there. If you got any questions related to fantasy basketball, leave them there as well. Anything else you'd like to see from us in the future, be sure to leave that there as well. And last but not least, support the Fantasy Basketball Advice Forum. I think that's what we're calling this, right?
Yeah, so we got, it's Fantasy Football Advice Network. It's Fantasy Sports Advice basically is the umbrella. Most of you that are watching or catch on, you probably have seen the fantasy football shows that they have almost daily. We're doing basketball. We're going to get into some baseball. We're going to have a lot of different fantasy content added onto the website that they already have. So, I mean, if you play fantasy football, fantasyfootballadvice.com. It's like a Twitter basically for fantasy football only. We're going to have that for basketball, all other sports. As we continue to grow. So, yeah, we want to create content for everybody who plays in those different fantasy sports, all the different, communities, forums, styles. We want to be able to bring something of value to everybody, in each of those arenas. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back, like I said, with another show. We'll be on live soon enough. And, a little more streamlined, maybe a little shorter, but hopefully you guys got something out of this. And until next time, for Coach and myself, Coach Craig, SoCal Ball Nerd, we will catch y'all later. Have a wonderful night.